Today on the Roundhouse, we are talking to the president of the National Model Railroad Association. All aboard!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Gozarek, and this is episode number 51 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. Today, we are talking to Charlie Getz. He is the president of the National Model Railroad Association, and we will be learning more about what the NMRA is, what it does, and how they've become so big nationally, and what they do for the hobby. Our guest today is the president of the National Model Railroad Association, which is the primary governing body of sorts for North American model railroading. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Charlie Getz.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
What is the NMRA in a nutshell, for those who've never heard of it before?
In a nutshell, it is the world's biggest and oldest scale model railroad association. We have been in existence since 1935. We have traditionally set standards for the industry. I wouldn't quite call us a regulatory body, but we certainly are followed by custom more than anything else, and practicality by the industry, but we do more than that.
I guess the term regulatory body comes to mind for me because there's an officialness with the title and this image of people knocking on doors with scales to make sure everything on a layout is completely accurate. And of course, you're much more than that, but that's sort of the image that comes to my head.
Well, unfortunately, and I wish we did, because I've been to enough model railroads with anachronistic elements to them that I wish we could go around with the scale police and say, hey, this is out of place and you shouldn't have this and all that. But we don't. What we do is make sure that products from A are interchangeable with products from B. Now, imagine and contrast Silicon Valley, where I happen to live. You have an Apple iPhone. You try charging that with a Samsung charger. Ain't going to work. Now, there are some interfaces, but they really, that isn't the way it's designed. In our industry, it would have been the same except for the NMRA. The NMRA ensures by our standards that all the wheels, all the couplers, all of the electronics work seamlessly, regardless of the manufacturer, with products of a similar nature with other manufacturers. One exception, that's Digital Command Control, DCC, which obviously, for very good reasons, much like Silicon Valley, has integral products that only work with their own components. But with that exception, if you buy a locomotive from manufacturer A, a power pack from manufacturer B, track from number C, and even trucks and couplers from D and E, put them all together, it's going to work together.
How is it that you've developed this cooperation with the manufacturers? Since, as you say, you're not exactly a regulatory body, what is the incentive to them for having these standards in place?
We are the largest organized accumulation of their customers. So much like I'll give you some other examples. Look at the Underwriters Laboratory that regulates all of electrical equipment in the United States. It's not a governmental entity. It's a private group of what? Insurance companies. And they underwrite liability. Well, obviously, it is in the interests of the manufacturers of electrical equipment to make sure that their equipment presents the least amount of claim damage or claim risk, so they cooperate with the UL, Underwriter Laboratory, recommendations. Similarly, we represent the largest block of purchasers and consumers for model railroad equipment. We are the customers that these people are trying to reach. We are a very serious group of model railroaders in the sense that you don't spend hard-earned hobby money on an association, which gives you no products back for that money, unless you have a real commitment to the hobby. So although we are not the biggest group of hobbyists in the world, we are, I think, the most effective in the sense that we're organized, and the hobby manufacturers pay respect to that. So it's developed since 1935 as a tradition over time and has proven effective. And finally, it's in the enlightened self-interest of the manufacturers to make sure that their products are not the odd person out, if you will, in not working with other products, because who's going to buy them? There is an example of that, by the way, and that is Märklin, which is a German HO manufacturer. They make an AC, not DC, not direct current, but alternating current, AC HO system, which cannot be used, obviously, with a DC system, which everyone else uses. Well, Märklin is very much a minority manufacturer because of that, yet they go their own way. But that's the exception. Everyone else pretty much is happy to use our standards because they're proven, they work, and they make sense.
1935, that's an interesting date for the founding of your organization, considering that's the middle of the Depression, but it's also 30 years after Lionel, roughly 30 years after Lionel was founded. What were the conditions that brought about the formation of the group, and how has that goal remained the same or changed over the past 81 years?
Well, it's good math, but it basically, and counterintuitively, our hobby does extremely well during depressions and recessions. And you might think, what? That doesn't make sense because a hobby should be a luxury. Why would you do well? Well, it started during the Depression. The scale hobby started during the Depression. The tin plate or toy hobby, as you point out, was going from about 1902 onward with Lionel and others. But the scale part of it really started developing in the 30s. Why? People were out of work. People had nothing to do. They had time on their hands. And when people have time on their hands, they occupy that time. Many people are obviously looking for a job, but that doesn't account for 24 hours. So it doesn't cost a lot of money to get a piece of wood and whittle something. It doesn't cost a lot of money to get some cardboard, some glue, some wood, some poster paint, and make a little something in miniature. There was a need, therefore, for that kind of activity, and an activity that took the minds off the Depression. That's why movies were so popular. That's why you had the Busby Berkeley extravaganzas during that era. Everybody had a nickel to go see the show. Well, model railroading started because of those same factors, although it was and remains a rather expensive hobby if you look at it that way. But people were interested enough to get into the hobby. Magazines started about that time. The two major ones started in 1933 and 1934, respectively. Those are now Rail Model Craftsman, then Model Craftsman, and Model Railroader. And the NMRA started in 1935, a year after. So it was a dynamic time for hobbies because of the Depression.
If we were to look at that time, too, as being the birth of organized rail appreciation, because it was not too long after that the NRHS, the National Railway Historical Society, was founded, and you started seeing the excursions and the preservation movements. How do you think model railroading, the NMRA, might have played a role in crafting that movement?
I don't know if there's a direct correlation. I doubt there is. However, interest in trains certainly was spread by miniatures. Having things like the exposition in 1934 in Chicago, where there was an O-scale model railroad built by the Baltimore and Ohio. We had other fairs where there were famous model railroads built in the early 30s. That kind of got people's attention and interest and reinforced the fact that you could do more with trains than ride them for transportation. That if you had an interest in trains, there were alternatives. Modeling was one of them. When roads became better, when cameras and equipment became better and more accessible, people started to realize you could actually travel and visit these railroads and take photographs. And I think the rail fan experience was born out of the fact that roads were being built, which ironically doomed the passenger train, but also gave them access to places they couldn't go before. You started seeing articles then in magazines in the very late 30s and early 40s, really, from these kinds of pioneer trips to some places that had been previously accessible only by rail. And when you're on a train, it's very tough to take pictures of it. I think that they kind of developed in parallel, but not necessarily one benefiting from the other.
It's fitting that we're doing this episode around Christmas time because that takes us into the 1950s where the toy train around the tree, particularly Lionel, but American Flyer had its own strong following, was the quintessential gift for young boys in particular. What were the conditions that helped that to be at the forefront of toy interests? I recognize it's toy and not model railroading, but one could say that the toy segued for some into model railroading. And what precipitated its decline from the mainstream?
Well, two things. In the 1950s, and that's when I got into trains, not model railroading, but trains. I was born in 1948. I'm 68, so I'm quintessential baby boomer. About 1955, I got a Lionel train set, and I was about, eight years old or so. And it never really took. It was a toy. It ran around the tree. I had it afterwards. I don't even remember what happened to it, but it disappeared. When I was 13, I was given another Christmas present. This was a scale HO model railroad train set with a lousy locomotive, by the way, but for some reason that took. Why? Because in the interim, something that developed during the 50s had happened, and that was hobbies. Hobbies were really not big for kids in the Depression. The people who got into model railroading in the Depression started the NMRA. They're all adults. There were no kids in the hobby. It was a hobby that required you to cut metal, solder, in some cases weld, bend, all sorts of stuff, things you had to do with metal that most kids would have no clue and would not be allowed to do. By the time you got into the late 40s and early 50s, you had an explosion in consumer products available, and you had an explosion in technology. The technology of the 50s was what? Plastic. Plastic revolutionized model railroading. Plastic made model railroading cheaper and accessible for kids. I used to build, and well, you're probably not as old as I am, but when I was a kid, I built Revell and Aurora plastic kits. They were 98 cents. We could afford that on a $1 or $2 a week allowance. And we would buy these kits, and they were usually ships, or they were tanks, or they were all sorts of different kinds of things. And we would smear glue all over them and make a big mess, but they were a great delight to build, and you had something that you felt you accomplished in a few days. Model railroading was kind of an extension of that, with the added benefit, which still exists, that the darn things ran. That you just not only built something, but you actually got to use it, and it actually all worked together. And so that's why in the 50s, model railroading went from the toy train Lionel approach to the more sophisticated HO and N later, which is smaller, scale kind of train, because we had that experience as young kids and teenagers of building models, sometimes not even train models, but just models. And this was an extension of that. Now today, why is it fading? And it is. Technology, again, the technology has gone away from those kind of analog activities of building things with your hands to electronic devices that answer your every need. So the thumb generation, as I call them, the poor millennials that are so maligned in some quarters, are seen as folks who only have interest in digital devices. And we are not really a digital hobby, although we have certainly very advanced electronics in our hobby.
Unpacking that further, where would you describe where the hobby is now from your perspective? Just sort of a state of the union.
Oh, sure. I just wrote one for the NMRA editorial, so you're prescient in asking. This is absolutely, and this is not a sales pitch, but this is absolutely the best time to be in this hobby. Why? A couple of things. One, unparalleled realism. The technology of today, 3D printing, laser cutting, all of that we use, fine cross sections, unbelievable technology that allows us to recreate in miniature things that almost look like they were shrunk from the real thing, and they're just sitting there in front of your eyes. You can't believe how wonderful they are. Secondly, technology. We have digital command control. We have digital sound. We have iPhones that can control your trains with an app. We have something called layout command control, which is brand new using C-bus technology, which is the same kind of C-bus technology as is used in your car. Plug and play. It controls your lighting. It controls your signaling, all with either a computer interface or direct simple programming. It's reliability of mechanisms unheard of when I started in the hobby back in the very early 60s. Things like that. It's scale refinement so that the thicker sections and the cruder wheels and rail sizes that we used to have because of the mechanisms being so big no longer exist. It's importing hybrid locomotives now from China that come painted, weathered, digital sound, digital control for the same cost as what used to be an unpainted plastic locomotive. So this is the absolute best time to be in the hobby. And yet, ironically, our numbers are shrinking.
What do you think is precipitating your numbers shrinking?
It's entirely due to the fact that, and this is according to Rutgers University study and others on younger generations, that the younger generations, and I'm not damning them by any stretch, they're fantastic folks, but the younger generations simply don't have the same interest in a hobby that the baby boomers or the Gen X or Y people have. Millennials, and maybe even, we're not quite sure about post-millennial yet, but don't like delayed gratification activities. And this is, again, a gross generalization. I'm not knocking these nice people, believe me, but this is what Rutgers said. And so they don't populate and join associations necessarily. They don't get into analog hobbies, and ours is primarily an analog hobby. By that I mean, if you want a model railroad, you build it. It isn't something that you can digitally download. So it's something that you have to actually take a hammer and nail and lumber and all sorts of things, and then you add digital elements to it. But it is analog activities. A lot of folks just aren't into that. I mean, they don't use X-Acto knives, and they don't cut things, and they don't glue things, and they don't paint things. That just isn't something they do. So because of that, this generation just has not come behind us, and so our hobby is aging. Our average age in the NMRA is now in the mid-60s. A decade ago, it was 39. It stayed 39 from 1960 to about 1995. Now it's progressively getting older. Because why? We're not getting young folks in the hobby. Kids love trains. 7-year-olds love trains. 14-year-olds couldn't be bothered. So something happens between the two that didn't used to happen in the old days.
Traditionally, what has your organization done as far as encouraging youth into the hobby and joining as part of your organization? And how are you looking to shift that with the changing times?
Well, we're doing a couple of things. Traditionally, we didn't have to do much because people naturally gravitated toward hobbies. Not our hobby necessarily. Model airplanes, still fairly big, not as big as it used to be. RC seems to be holding its own. That wasn't really a big hobby when I started, of course, but slot cars were, which have disappeared. But what we did do, and we still do, is that we would hold train shows. We would work with the Boy Scouts. There's a model railroading merit badge. We actually run that program for the Boy Scouts. And that's still a big thing, but we don't find the Boy Scouts then getting into model railroading. They earn the badge, they're interested, they look at it, it's very interesting, and then they move on to something else. Because we have, unlike the 1960s, we have competition that's overwhelming and is very tough to compete. And that is the digital world that we live in, the internet. I mean, how can you compete with the internet? How can you compete with the sophisticated electronic devices that are so entertaining with the video games that didn't exist a generation ago? That's very tough. It really is. It isn't a matter that trains are no longer interesting, because they are. When I was a kid, trains were not the big thing. Jet engines and rocket ships were. But yet there was a vibrant hobby. And that's true today. Kids still love trains. Thomas the Tank Engine, very popular, that kind of thing. But kids discover digital devices, and it's very tough to compete with that because they fill so many needs and they are so omnipresent. What we're trying to do, the second thing we're trying to do, besides working on those same programs we always have with kids, is go where the fish are. And where are the fish right now? Retirees, people who are just getting out of work, retiring, and looking for something to do with their spare time. Well, they have the income because in most cases the kids are grown now, out of the house, and they have an interest, and many of them have that analog recall of their youth when they would build models. So we are actually finding great success in trying to reach out to older folks, recognizing this is not a panacea. It may be a short-term hitch to help us over the tough time right now. We have great hopes for the generation following the digital generation, because I think and this is a truth, but it's borne out by generations. Every generation rejects the excesses of the former. In the 1960s, my generation, what were we? We were the rebels. What did we do? We went out and marched. We stopped the Vietnam War. We did all these protests. We all grew long hair, right? We smoked weed and all that great stuff, although some of us did, but some of us didn't. Why did we do that? Because our parents were what? The greatest generation, yes, but also the conformists of the 50s. They were the ones that wore the button-down shirts, went to work every day. Mom stayed at home, did her housewife bit. Dad, worked at Madison Avenue. You've seen the movies, right? Glory flannel suit and all that. So that generation rebelled against that. Well, this generation that is currently coming of manhood and womanhood is the digital generation, and they are famously wedded to their devices to the point of being made fun of. And again, it's a broad caricature, and I'm not damning them, but it's somewhat true, isn't it? The old joke about a couple having dinner and they're texting each other to ask how dinner is at the same restaurant, sitting across from each other. Well, it's a joke, but I mean, there's some truth to it. I have to think, and there are studies that indicate this, that the generation meaning their kids, who sees this and says, I don't think I want to live that way. I think I want to actually talk to that person. I can't imagine texting my wife to say, how's dinner? Again, being a gross overgeneralization. We're kind of hopeful that maybe that generation will look around for something to do that's different than that of their parents, and they'll maybe look back upon the pleasures of working with your hands as something worthwhile. So that's, in a long nutshell, what we're thinking. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. If we're right, good for us.
When we return to our conversation with Charlie, I ask him a bit more about where he sees the hobby going, and I give him a challenge of sorts. As a Christmas present to the organizations and people involved with them who are listeners on the show, I asked for submissions for holiday events that you guys would like to have promoted on the show. And I have two that I'd like to share with you. First, from Dwayne Furing of the Mad River and Nickel Plate Railroad Museum. Celebrate the Christmas season with the second annual holiday train at the Mad River and Nickel Plate Railroad Museum. We'll be running caboose rides again this year for only $5 per rider. No reservations required. Tickets will be available the day of the event. Included with the price are hot chocolate and cookies in our diner. Santa Claus will also be there to meet with the kids. Trackside gifts will be open as well for your Christmas shopping needs. Now, this is taking place December 17th and 18th of 2016, so that's this coming weekend if you're listening to the episode when it's brand new, and you can find out more at madrivermuseum.org. Second, from Ted Roy, the Connecticut Trolley Museum. Join hundreds of others and start a family tradition of coming for a holiday ride during the holiday season. Whether you ride a closed car or brave the cold to ride the open electric sleigh, we promise you a good time and one that you'll remember for years. Join your motormen in singing traditional Christmas carols as the trolley makes its way through the Tunnel of Lights. When you return, head inside the Visitor Center, which has been transformed into a winter wonderland, complete with model trains, decorations galore, and you can even buy a delicious cup of hot cocoa to sip as you enjoy the entertainment. Additionally, meet and pose for a picture with Santa. Santa will also have a gift for each child. Now, this is taking place on a bunch of dates, the weekend of the 17th and 18th, and the full week after Christmas. You can find out more about their event at ct-trolley.org, and I'll have links for both of these in the show notes for episode number 51. Listener Tony Berzio raises this question. DCC is a challenge for novices. What is the future direction for the NMRA on this vital technology? And for those who aren't familiar with DCC, it stands for Digital Command Control, basically a way that the locomotives are essentially miniature computers, and rather than just sending electricity to the track to make them go, they can respond to a wide variety of digital commands that are sent. With this technology that is really coming into its own, especially in the past 5 years, I would say, how does that work to engage as you look upon it, the cell phone generation? Because I do think that there is something there that, A, does engage quite a few of the younger generation already, but can help to expand that more as more people are introduced to it, especially with apps that allow you to control the trains from your phones.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a couple of things. We have, and NMRA has really led the charge on this, we have gone beyond DCC in some ways with new technology ironically based upon established technology, and that's the C-bus. I think that's the right term. I'm not a techie, so forgive me if I'm using it wrong. But it's plug and play, basically. I'll tell you the problem with DCC and the advantage of DCC. The advantage of DCC is that what it does, and when it works, it's fantastic. It sends packets of information superimposed on a high current on your rail to an individual receiver in a locomotive, which interprets that data and sets the voltage for that locomotive and does a variety of other functions, such as the lighting and the sound effects and all that, all at the same instantaneously, with constant communication between the receiver and the sender. So it's very, very sophisticated. That's the advantage. That means you can actually have, like the real thing, a cornfield meet, meaning two engines can actually run in opposite directions in the same track and run into each other. You couldn't do that with standard DC, we call it direct current wiring. It wouldn't happen. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage is what? It's really not user-friendly in the sense that, unlike your iPhone, unlike your iPad, where you have a learning curve, but the learning curve is how to actually use the darn thing, not how to program it in most cases. You may have to add some apps and things, but in most cases you don't have to really get into the nuts and bolts and speak the language. But to utilize a DCC system, you have to really get into the system itself to configure it the way you want. There are variables to be set, and they're complicated. We have what's called a programming track. When you buy a locomotive, even with one that has a DCC receiver, you have to put that on a special track and program that receiver for your use. Well, for some people, this is not easy. This isn't the same as going down to Apple and buying an iPad and syncing it with your iPhone because you both have Bluetooth, right? No brain involved. I'm proof of that because I can do that, and I don't know tech stuff. Now, LCC, Layout Command Control, which is also the digital platform, is proving, and it's still in beta testing, so it isn't out there yet. There are modules that do all that thinking for you. In other words, what they do is they will take the throttle from one DCC manufacturer, the base unit from another DCC manufacturer, and the receivers from another, and make them all work together just by plugging all of those things into a module using standard cords and plugs you buy at Radio Shack, or now Fry's Electronics in our neck of the woods, or whoever your electronic supplier is. It's literally plug and play. You'll be able to buy a module that controls up to 50 switch machines. All you have to do is plug the switch machine on one end into a regular socket like you have on your phone, and on the other end plug it into this module, and bam, there comes on the screen in the module, switch number one, what do you want me to do with it? Yes, no. Simple English programming, which isn't really programming at all. So that has a tremendous potential for correcting a lot of the technical problems with DCC that require you to have a pretty sophisticated knowledge, more so than I have, for example.
It seems like it'll be an interesting system as it continues to be tested. And the trick then, obviously, is going to be taking people's pre-existing knowledge, familiarity, and investment in DCC and transitioning that into LCC.
Yes, well, the beauty of it is that because it is plug and play, they're not going to have to rip everything out and redo everything. In other words, they can continue using DCC. Right now, the problem with DCC, beyond the technical issues, is that it uses a bus line, and that bus line has limited capacity. The bandwidth isn't as wide. Well, I'll give you an example. The C-bus broadband width is like 100 times better than the best DCC system. So if you're using DCC, but you're using it more than just for a few locomotives, you're also using it for what are called stationary decoders, which is a fancy way of saying switch machine control or signals. Your signals start slowing down because of all the traffic on that one bus wire. And that's just like you can imagine water going through a pipe. If you have the water flow, too many things operating at once, your water pressure goes way down, doesn't it? Well, it's the same with DCC. This LCC systems seem to solve that problem. You'd never have enough devices hooked up to even affect it at all. So everything will run smoother, and it's also, just like today with my iMac, I can plug in an external drive into the back of my iMac. I do not have to understand what that drive is, how it works with the iMac. I just plug it in. What happens? A little icon pops up on my screen and says, oh, I see you have a CD reader or DVD reader. Do you want to see it now? Yes. That's exactly how LCC will work. You plug it, it recognizes the device, It, in its plain English, tells you, oh, do you want to use this now? And you say, yes, I do, and the device is used because it knows what it is. So I think that's the direction we're seeing, and I think that's one technological area that's going to be very interesting. The second one, which I think is even more fascinating, is based upon where I live, Silicon Valley again, and that is what I call power on board. Consider this, DCC-controlled digital sound, no wiring, because why? Battery operated. So your radio-controlled DCC system still controls the locomotive, still controls the power, but there's no rail power, dead rail, just like the real thing. Where does the power come from? On-board, highly charged batteries that run the mechanism for up to 8 hours on one charge. And how do you charge it again when it runs down? Just like the real thing, you have to get it refueled, right? Well, you take it to a special track, a charging plate, park it there. A few minutes later, it's charged. Doesn't have to go off the track, doesn't have to be hooked up to any wires, just through the track, bam, it's wired. And it's recharged and ready to go. So that power on board is already in existence in the larger scales, which is O scale, quarter inch to the foot. Not quite there in HO, certainly not in N scale, which is a smaller scale. But it will be one day, and it's driven by Silicon Valley technology, driven by Tesla, driven by all the folks who are working on miniaturizing and improving batteries. So that technology is right around the corner, and that will solve a ton of problems when it comes to all the wiring and the necessity of having to even do any wiring for your rails.
It sounds like then the NMRA is very involved in the development of this LCC. Among this and helping to set the standards for model railroad manufacturing, what are some of the other services that your organization provides both individual members and clubs who are members?
Well, we do it quite a bit. We're an educational not-for-profit corporation, a 501c3. So you donate to us, it's like donating to the Red Cross. We educate, we try to get outreach to the public about what model railroading is all about, to the hobby. Besides this thing, for our individual members, we offer a ton of advantages and a lot of education. For example, we have local, we call them divisions. We use railroad nomenclature, but divisions are local chapters of the NMRA. I just went to a meeting yesterday, an event yesterday, my local chapter of the NMRA, where we will have, and I'll give you an example of what happened yesterday. We had 3 clinics, we call them classes, on different topics. One was on how to improve your layout with scenery. Another one was on adding a logging branch. If you wanted to do some logging on your layout, how would you do that? And a third one was on troubleshooting on your layout. What kind of problems are you having and how can you fix them? These are things that you can go to and attend. We also have them online for our members in video format, where you can see how to do certain tasks, how to improve your modeling, how to solve problems, how to even build a layout if need be. That's one way. A second way is we have conventions, regions, and there are 18 regions in the NMRA around the world. Regions, which are larger accumulations of local area modelers, are held once a year, and those regional conventions, you can have 3 or 4 days of intense model railroading activity, hundreds, literally dozens of, if not hundreds of clinics, home layout visits, where you can go and see the work of other people and learn from that. Those take place, train shows. Then we have every year a national massive model railroad convention. This year it's going to be in Orlando, Florida in July. And last year it was in Indianapolis. And this is like model railroading on steroids. For an entire week, you have a postgraduate course in advanced model railroading. Everything from actually beginners to more advanced, but mostly advanced. You learn how to do all sorts of things, everything from 3D printing to programming your DCC if need be, to how to install a decoder, to how to create a sound system, ambient sound for your layout. You name it, there's going to be a class on that. Also, literally hundreds of model railroads that you can visit within a 50-mile radius. And so and then the biggest train show in the country at the end of the week. We do that. And the last thing we do, and I think is most important, is something called the Achievement Program, where you are challenged to earn something that's very difficult to earn. It's called the Master Model Railroader Award. And to earn that, you have to show proficiency in 7 of 11 fields. Think of it as kind of like an extra Boy or Girl Scout program for adults. You really have to stretch yourself to earn this award. It's been around since 1960, and we have a whopping total of under 600 people who have been able to do this. I can assure you a lot more have tried than that.
The achievement program is something that stuck out to me. It's kind of like a PhD for model railroading, except it doesn't give you a job or anything like that, but it's about pushing yourself and seeing how far you could take your own model railroading skills.
Correct. Yes, that's absolutely correct. That's a good way to say. It's a postgraduate course, if you will, but it's not really a course. You don't train for this. You demonstrate what you have learned already. And if you don't know enough, you have to go and force yourself to learn. So it isn't us teaching you how to be a master model railroader. It's you showing us you are one. And that's why it's difficult. You have to earn 7 certificates. I'll give you an example of what's involved in one. If you want to earn a certificate in structures, for example, you have to present, I think it's like 7 or 8, maybe even more, and it's on our website, so don't hold me to this, but I'll just pick out some numbers out of a hat. But you have to present, say, 8 models that you have built or assembled. And those models have to earn enough points. If they were entered in a contest, they'd be considered to be winners. So it isn't just you build 8 models, here they are, whoopee doodle, thank you very much. These have to be superior models. They have to be well done, and they have to earn a certain number of points. I think it's 79 points out of 100. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. It really is. And 4 of them have to be entirely scratch built, which means you can't use a kit, which some people think is easy to do. No, it isn't really. Building a kit is not necessarily easy. But you have to actually get the materials, make your own plan, build it out of whatever, and it has to be good enough to have won an award in a contest. So that's just one of 7 categories. Now, other categories like track work, you have to build your own turnouts from scratch, from regular rail, lay your own, do all the filing and the intricate work to make the turnout really work. And it has to meet our standards, which are very, very tough. And you have to do that for like 3 or 4 different kinds of track work. You can't just build one switch, say, I've done it. You have to lay so much track on your own, hand lay it. So these are not easy things to do, and they take time. Becoming an MMR is not something you say, it's Tuesday, I think I'll become an MMR and get it by next week. No, it's going to take you months, if not years, to win all of these certificates. And the certificates have to be in certain categories. So like me, I love building structures. I hate building, I can't build locomotives for the life of me. But if I want to earn my MMR, I'm going to have to master how to build freight cars and how to do locomotive mechanisms, because I need a certificate in one of those 2. I can't just do structures and then do something else that's easy, and then it's like college credits. You know, you're not going to be able to take underwater basket weaving and get your degree in history. You're going to have to actually go out and take some tough courses out there. And I had to do that at UCLA, so that's the way it is. That's the way we've structured it as well. Everyone who gets their MMR says it was the most worthwhile thing they ever did in the hobby, number 1. Number 2, it forced them to learn things they never would have done on their own, but they had to get this. And number 3, it made them a far better modeler and a far better and more satisfied hobbyist. So we're very proud of that program. It's not an easy one, and I have 3 certificates myself. As president, I'm a little bit busy, so I'm not really working on the other 4. But I'm bound and determined. Once I retire from this, I'm going to be one of those that keeps working at it and get my MMR one day.
Provide us with a bit of insight into the inner workings of your hub. So you're the president, and there is a paid staff, and then there's a volunteer effort. What is the structure of your organization? What are the operations that occur throughout the year to make these programs and these initiatives and this outreach happen?
Well, we are overwhelmingly a volunteer organization. We have thousands of people who are involved who are volunteers. We are very lean and mean. I'm very proud of that as a nonprofit on the management end. We have 4 paid staff positions, 3 of which are currently filled. 1 is open, but we are looking for a person for it. They're all at our headquarters in Chattanooga area, Tennessee. Mostly office functions, obviously the membership and keeping track of records and all that. But everyone else is volunteer. I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid. Our board of directors, we have 9 people. We have 4 or 5 officers, and that's it. We have about 12 department heads. We separate our functionality into departments. For example, because we set standards, we have a standards and conformance department, and that's run by a volunteer, and he has a staff of also volunteers. We have a magazine. That is a paid person, but that's on a consultant basis. We have an editor who's paid, but we also have a person who's not paid who gets ads for us, so it kind of helps pay for the magazine. We sell the magazine to our members by subscription. So every month we put out a magazine. We put out a e-bulletin, which is an electronic free magazine for our members every other month. We have the convention I mentioned once a year, which takes up a tremendous amount of time. And we also do programs during the year, such as Boy Scouts, Achievement Program, all run by the national organization. And we also oversee and help the regions and the divisions, 156 divisions, 18 regions worldwide, coordinate with them to make sure everything's working well for them. So we keep ourselves busy, but it is overwhelmingly volunteer.
Here's where I want to give you a little bit of a challenge, Charlie. I myself am a model railroader. I grew up with my dad, who we worked together on train layouts. Now I've been building my own shelf layout in my apartment, and I'm kind of satisfied with the progress as sort of a side thing where I can do with the time. I don't belong to any model railroading clubs, namely because the nearest clubs are at least an hour away from me. I have some interest in potentially starting up one in my town, but again, would have concerns about the amount of time it would require to get that type of thing up and running. So, what can the NMRA provide me? A, as an individual modeler, and B, as someone who would be looking to start a club in an area which has a few rail fans, but would admittedly need to get people who've never considered model railroading into it.
Sure. Like anything else, the number one thing we offer is something that's very hard to sell because it is so intangible, and that is the networking that you get from belonging to an organization that has people literally in just about every place you can imagine and in every profession you can imagine. So you want to start a club. We have people in your area who have started clubs or who are involved in clubs who can give you help on how you do that. We offer very, very reasonable insurance for a club. If your club is 100% NMRA club, meaning all your members are NMRA members, the liability insurance we offer that wherever you rent your space or get your space from will require is dirt cheap compared to what the commercial rate is. That's one of the advantages of clubs in the NMRA. We also offer, on a personal level, the ability to travel. I don't know where you are, and I don't need to, but there will be a division that is active in your area, and they will have meetings in various locations around that area. And you can go to those, and they're held on a regular basis, and you can interact and meet folks in your area that you may not even know are model railroaders. Also, you can, again, attend classes and get that expertise you need. You have the right as a member then to attend any division or region meet, no matter where it is in the world. I've attended them overseas in Europe. I've attended them in England, Australia. We have very active chapters there. And so you can do all of that good stuff. So then, of course, there's the Achievement Program, which doesn't require you to interact with other people other than building models and having a team visit you and do the judging for that.
With regards to the knowledge front, being one of the internet, I belong to model railroading Facebook groups, and there are people in my area who do model in their own layout. So as an individual modeler, I feel like I can get what I need from them. What can your organization offer that I'm not able to get from online groups or other podcasts or people that I know who model?
Well, it's tough to say because you look at the internet, and the blessing of the internet is that you can get a tremendous amount of information. The problem with the internet is that you get a tremendous amount of information, and there's no way of vetting the information necessarily. I mean, how Yelp is famous for reviews. Well, how good are the reviews? I look at a review of a local restaurant, and I read what is said about it. I don't recognize the restaurant half the time because of my personal experience, right? What you get with the NMRA is information that is tried, true, tested, and accurate. Now, you can probably get that from most sites as well. I'm not going to say that we are the only ones that offer sound advice or good information. That isn't true. But because of the nature of what we offer and what we do, the information that we provide is the absolute best we can get, and a lot of it is online. If you're a member, you have an access to hundreds of videos, instructional videos that people cannot get online because we have them and we've developed them. Now, can you get similar videos online? Sure you can. Oh yeah, everybody, believe me, has a blog or an interest or a tutorial about how to do something, and I look at those too, and some of them are terrific. But part of the problem I have is which ones are terrific and which ones are, I don't know. There's so much out there. It is very tough to edit. It really is. Now, that may not be a problem. It's kind of a blessing, frankly, because in the old days, you didn't have any of that stuff. And now you have a wealth of it. So I'm not gonna say the NMRA offers things that are absolutely crucial and you can't find it in the internet. Not necessarily true. But what we do offer is excellent, tried and true, and proven. And we also offer that one added thing the internet doesn't: true, caring people who follow up with you and will follow up and personally, in many cases, get together with you and do things. I'm not sure on the internet you really get that.
Looking ahead at the future, another question from a listener, Mark Lomason, asks, where do you see the NMRA in the next few years?
Well, hopefully I see it continuing its mission as it has since 1935, because what we do is still important. We're still setting standards to this day. LCC, Layout Command Control, Power on Board. We set standards for all of those to make sure they work. That mission is not over. As technology improves and changes, that mission continues. Education continues. As the technology improves, our obligation and interest in sharing that technology and that information continues as well. So I see us continuing what we do, but I do see us morphing more into the higher tech level than we have in the past. All of us would love to go online and be digital completely, not have a print magazine, for example. We're not quite there yet, but we're moving toward it. We would love to have, and we're right now digitalizing hundreds of thousands of plans and photos so that those will be preserved for all time. For example, we own the catalog for the Porter Locomotive Company, one of the major prototype locomotive manufacturers of the 19th and 20th century. We have their records, and we are slowly getting those digitalized and can be used online, so that people who want to model something that was made by that company will get all the information they ever wanted in digital format. I see us accelerating that effort. We're trying to index all the model magazines ever published so that the information can be captured. It's a tremendous amount of work. I see that continuing.
Another listener question, this time from Jason Rice. Why should I encourage a 10-year-old or 13-year-old that are members of my club to join the NMRA? So we're talking about youth that already see the light, as it were, of model railroading. But what can the NMRA provide them where they're already on the track, but they could do with more?
Well, our youngest master model railroader is when he became a master model railroader was 14 years old. Believe it or not, that's a major accomplishment. I wouldn't say that a 13-year-old should obviously get into the achievement program right off the bat. No. What we can offer anybody who's young is a structure, also inspiration, a formal education, if you will, in the sense of the clinics I mentioned. And these are local. These aren't necessarily requiring that the person and their family travel hundreds and thousands of miles. And the fact they can interact with other modelers who are very serious and very dedicated to the hobby. I like to think that people who join an organization like the NMRA are very, very dedicated to the hobby, more so than somebody who just is a model railroader who likes it, who does it, who is interested in it. But if you shell out money to join the NMRA, and by the way, we have a youth and a student discount program if they join, if you do that, I think that's a real commitment to the hobby because, like I said, you don't get a boxcar back for your $44 or your $60 or whatever it is. You may get a magazine, but you don't get anything tangible, really, do you? And the people who join always say that the best asset of joining was something they never expected, and that is friendships, the fact they learned so much, the fact they could interact on a face-to-face basis with other hobbyists who had an interest. And that goes far beyond what the internet can offer.
What have you personally, Charlie, come out with the most from your time with the NMRA? What is the most gratifying part of it for you?
I think it's the people. I really do. And again, that's something that's very hard to sell. If I go to a hobbyist who's not an NMRA member and say, hey, join us and meet your best friend, they're going to look at me like I'm some kind of an idiot, and rightly so. But, I've met people in every walk of life that is passionate about model railroading. The most notable one being Rod Stewart, the rock star. Had a nice chat with him. He's a passionate model railroader. That's really his great love in life, is model railroading. His hero is a model railroader. You think Rod Stewart's hero is a model railroader? Yeah, honest to God. But it isn't just the Rod Stewarts of the world. It's the people you meet in all walks of life, all over the world, because you have this passion in common. Whether it's Paris, France, or London, England, Sydney, Australia, or Detroit, or in my neck of the woods in Silicon Valley, there are people who are fascinating people who have knowledge that can benefit you, that are just love to meet you and share that knowledge with you. And that's what makes an organization such as ours so valuable. Now, I'm not knocking the internet. You can get a lot of great information off of that, but it's more impersonal, isn't it? And you can have interactions with, I belong to a number of chat groups. You have great interactions, but it isn't the same as sitting down with somebody and saying, I'm having this little problem here. What do you think? And having them say, well, I tried this, I tried that. Let me look at your mechanism. Oh, I see what the problem is. It's that kind of a thing that is maybe old-fashioned, maybe antiquated in some minds, but still can't be beat in my book, and I think in most people's opinions.
There's definite value in that. And the fact that model railroading is built on people coming together to develop the technology, to develop the amazing layouts, it's a testament to what it means to get together as groups so we get to do bigger and better things. Very few individuals could fund and build and have the space for a club-sized layout on their own. But they get to be part of that because they're a part of a club.
That's right. And if internet were enough to satisfy all your needs, Apple and all the other Silicon Valley groups that are literally miles from where I live would never have user conferences, would they? Where you get together in person and you interact in person and you attend seminars in person and you see and question the newest technology, and you can ask the people who develop that technology questions and they answer them in real time. That is something that technology is slowly moving to the internet, but not really. It's still, there's a place for that. That's what we offer. We offer the best of both worlds. You have access to all the internet, but you also have access to stuff that can't be on the internet, and that is interpersonal interchanges with people who have knowledge that you would benefit from and can answer your question in real time right now, or come and look at your situation, your house, your models, your layout, and help you in 100 different ways. It's the only possible way of doing that is having an association of members who are committed and interested in doing that.
At the same time, I have to recognize, though, that what I do here on the Roundhouse is built because of the internet. And I have met so many fascinating people, such as yourself, Charlie, and such as the listeners who are joining us today, because of that. And that can lead to me meeting people in person, too. So it's this balance of, yes, I want the face-to-face experience with people because there's nothing that can fully replace that. But the internet proves to be a very powerful gateway to connecting to people in very meaningful ways in its own right.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so you don't give, and the nice thing about the NMRA is you don't give any of that up, do you, when you join? Blogs like yours are crucial. They're super. They're excellent for getting people together. Nothing wrong with that. Think of us as a blog on steroids, because not only do we have that internet presence, and if you're a member, you have a much greater access to that presence, i.e., those tutorials that are sitting out there waiting for you, hundreds of them on video for our members only page. But you also have access to a organized, cohesive program in different ways, whether it's AP or conventions and clinics, that gives you information in a different format that's very, very usable, that you can't get on the internet. And so it's Internet Plus, just like your blog is Internet Plus.
Well, I'm very flattered that you think the Roundhouse is Internet Plus. Charlie, thanks for joining us here and discussing how the hobby's grown, what the NMRA is doing to help expand and grow it, and the way in which it's connected with the development of the technology. It's been great to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and I've enjoyed it. And obviously, I think your listeners are well served by what you offer because the questions were just excellent, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
And now, the question of the day.
It was Thanksgiving last time on the Roundhouse, and I asked you guys, connected to trains and railroading, what you were most thankful for. Loads of interesting responses, and here are a few that I've selected. First, from Zach Librand. I'm thankful for all of the amazing experiences I've had. I've run trains to the Grand Canyon through 5 feet snowdrifts in sub-zero weather. I've run vintage streetcars through busy city streets, and I'm on my way to learning how to run light rail trains. So many good stories have come from my years of experience. There's been a lot of frustration and pain through it all, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Nick Chilianis writes, I am thankful for the hundreds of volunteers across our country who donate their blood, sweat, tears, and treasure to the preservation, restoration, maintenance, and operation of so many historical pieces of the rich legacy of the American railroads. Finally, from Lucas Lighton, I am most thankful for being in a railroad family. My grandfather and all of his 5 brothers worked for the Bangor and Aroostook Railway and the Maine Central. And when you have relatives in the railroad world, all of them and all the places they worked become family and home. His birthdays in recent years were attended by both real family and old railroading buddies. I've grown fond of them, and unfortunately some aren't around anymore. They are family. Rail fans and railroaders alike, we are all the same family. Couldn't agree more with you, Lucas. We have an amazing family that thrives trackside, online, and here at the Roundhouse. You guys are amazing listeners, and I appreciate you joining us here every episode, and it's always interesting to hear your answers to the question of the day. Speaking of which, your question of the day for this week is, where would you like to see model railroading go in the future? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com, links to social media there, and you can sign up for our free email newsletter and be notified every time we release a new episode. Thank you guys, and remember that the Roundhouse is our house.
And now, the question of the day.